Election night 2024. Good evening, everybody. I'm Monty Torres with FOX26 News. We'll be streaming this election night roundtable discussion. Joining me tonight are Alex Tavlian, principal of Park West Associates, Gurm, owner of Five River Strategies, and Blake Zante, executive director of Maddie Institute. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks so much, Monty.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
Glad you could join me tonight. All right. It has been an unprecedented election year, I would say, with all that has gone on leading up to tonight, election night. Now, you're watching, I'm sure, as I am, what's going on. What are your impressions about what you've seen up to now and what you're seeing right now? Feel free to just fire out there what you're seeing.
Well, I think it's too early to call. I mean, I think certainly we still have, over an hour left here in California and in a lot of Western states, for voting. So it's still ongoing. And of course, there are a lot of ballots still to be processed. So, obviously I hate to be that person to say it's too early to call, but I think we still have a lot of time left to see what sort of happens. And, you start to see one way or the other where things start to lean. But just as we were talking, when this recording started, Nav, sort of astutely pointed out that North Carolina was leaning Trump. And sort of, even though there's still some time left with ballots to process, I think, that's a clear indicator that there are some blue wall states and there are some other states that were maybe thought to lean slightly Democratic that may not be as safe.
True. And just as interesting is that I see that Virginia right now seems to be trending Trump again. It's early. We know there's a lot still to come in. That's going to may change later on, but it's intriguing to even see it that way at this stage of the game. Leading up to this too, we have something that's sort of unprecedented, and is that the Republican voters turned out for early voting in what I understand are unprecedented numbers. What will that mean?
Yeah, and I'll jump in, Monty. I think, we kind of saw no correction of what happened in 2020. You had, the Republican rhetoric that was really talking against mail-in voting. This time around, you saw that course correction. So we're going to start seeing how these late mail-in ballots are going to start trending with late mail-in ballots coming in. So like Blake said, I think it's really early to tell. And those mail-in ballots, we're going to have to figure out what's going to happen there.
I think one thing to add to that is also whether or not Republicans are just shifting their votes. People who reliably were voting on election day are merely just moving to early voting, or if Republicans are expanding their base to also incorporate election day voters. They're still part of the pie. They're still part of the equation. Are they really going to show up in the numbers they used to, or is this just moving the votes earlier in a calendar, so to speak?
Well, the flip side of that, I think, Alex, is all right. So traditionally, Republicans are known for turning out strong on election day. Now they came out so early. So are we going to see any sort of Democrat surge on election day that we're not used to?
I mean, I think there's something to be said for that, and there's a big question, certainly in California and here in the Central Valley. When we've looked at early vote numbers locally, Democrats have been underperforming compared to 2020, even just in raw percentages, not even in raw vote, but just in percentages, they've been underperforming in the early vote compared to 2020. And so that opens the door to, where are they going to materialize, if at all? Is it going to be tonight? Is it going to be today? Is it over the course of the last 2 days where, mail-in voting is harder to quantify because it's all bunched together right before election day? And that's going to have a lot of consequences for, I would say, three major races here, which is there are two major congressional, majority making seats, and then an assembly race between Esmeralda Soria and Joanna Garcia Rose that, very much is a hotly contested race between the two parties here in the Golden State.
Let's talk about that, some of the local races. And now, just before we started, you indicated you were seeing some interesting developments already early in the game right here today with some of the local races.
I mean, yeah, I was just at Fresno County County Clerk's office, and right now what I'm hearing on the ground is that there's a 2-hour line to wait. So you're seeing, Democrats that probably, like Alex pointed out, that stayed home, that are lining up at the county office and at polling sites and voting centers, wanting to vote right now. So the lines are long all around Fresno, and I think that we're seeing similar results in Merced County and Bakersfield. The Valley is the battleground of the House majority, and it's going to be interesting tonight to see where these late votes are going to fall.
Yeah, we're sharing some video we shot earlier today of some of those lines out and around town. So that's I don't remember those lines being like that in the recent past elections. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but I don't know.
Well, you got to realize our election system has changed in the last 4 years. So 4 years ago, March of 2020 was when Fresno County implemented the Voters' Choice Act, which is a transition from those precinct, garage or church precinct, voting centers to these massive voting centers where we have a good number of them in the county, but far fewer than when we had actual precincts that were designated for your neighborhood. And then more importantly, it'll enable people to vote in any portion of the county. So if you work in Coalinga, but you live in, Del Rey, you're able to vote in Coalinga. You don't have to be in Del Rey to cast your ballot. And so a lot of that means that there's a lot of bunching of voters. I could speak to this morning driving by the Woodward Park Library. There were some issues early in the morning with printers and being able to get ballots printed for voters. But a lot of it, the population isn't local. There are people who work in the area. They don't live in Northeast Fresno. They just happen to be there to cast a vote, and they're going to work.
Very reasonable explanation. That would explain it. Blake, what about some of the local races? We've got what was in 2020 one of the closest races in the country. We're talking about the 13th district congressional race. Were you seeing any changes in what could happen in that race this year? Do you expect it to be just as close?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked to people on both sides of the aisle who have all characterized it as a coin flip. I think both campaigns feel, confident that they've made the case to voters and done a good job at, trying to get out the vote with their respective sides. But, at the end of the day, the incumbent Congressman John Duarte is going to have to get that crossover vote, that independent vote, that Democrat vote that, may carry him over the edge barely again this time. And I think, this cycle, we've seen Adam Gray, he ran again 2 years ago previously, but I think he's also, we can see his campaign ramped up a little bit more this cycle. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the presidential election impacts that turnout in that district, and whether or not, folks, even though if they vote at the top of the ticket a certain way, will they still vote, in that congressional seat for either the incumbent, or will they vote for the challenger, Adam Gray?
And thanks for that correction. I said 2020, I meant 2022 the last time these two.
2022, yes. Yeah, correct.
Thank you for correcting that on that. All right, now, what about another close race 2 years ago? Not this one, but the 22nd district, Rudy Salas and David Valadeo. You seeing any shift in what you think the turnout will be here and the outcome of this race?
Yeah, I mean, this is as a Democrat, this has kind of been the blue wall for us in the Valley that we've been trying to take down. This is one of the closest races in the country. We flipped it in 2018. It's really going to be a turnout game. I think what we see in the CA 13th race, like Blake talked about, there are a lot more crossover voters. Republicans that'll vote for Adam Gray, and Adam Gray has the support of a lot of the Republican county sheriffs in the Central Valley. And John Duarte, voted against the immigration bill and has an appeal with Democrats as well. Here, I think it is a little bit more partisan, and the big test for Democrats has consistently been turnout. While we have a 16-point registration advantage in CA 22, if we can take those voters to the polls, I think Rudy Salas will be going to Congress. But we're going to find out later tonight how those trends start coming in.
Yeah, it's still expected to be pretty close, I imagine, no matter which way they end up. But both of those, nobody's expecting a runaway in either of those districts. Now, there's another district that was not quite as close in 2022. This one right here. Anybody expecting any surprises in the 21st Congressional District between veteran Jim Costa and his challenger, Michael Maher?
Absolutely not. Jim Costa is going to win by 10 points. Michael ran a spirited campaign, but I didn't see anything really different than the campaign he ran in 2022. This is going to be Jim Costa is going to get reelected to Congress.
Yeah, this is a race that hasn't changed one bit in 2 years, and the only thing that maybe is different is some of the media strategy of Maher's campaign, which would have worked excellent in the district Costa used to occupy, which is now a hodgepodge of his current district and that of John Duarte. And so, again, it's just one of those where the district has gotten so blue, it's very difficult to overcome and win it.
Are we keeping any close eyes on any of the other races? Some of the assembly races, for example, have been much talked about, for both the 8th Assembly District and the 27th, the 8th being George Adanovich and David Tangipa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that one.
It's a big fight. This is a big fight for Republicans, and Blake knows a lot about that, so I'll defer to him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, as a voter who lives in the district, I mean, I think I've been barraged by mail, both campaigns and also by outside groups, for or against the candidates in this race. And so I think, it is a Republican seat. I don't really see the vote records or the positions of either candidate really being that different. But I think it's really the messaging from both candidates is trying to present, different visions for how they'll lead in the state assembly. It's going to be close. I think it's going to be really close. George Radonovich has a lot of name ID from his years of service in Congress, but David Tongipa, I think, has raised a lot of money, nearly $1 million, I believe, and has really made a compelling case for maybe it's time for a new sort of Republican in the state legislature.
A lot of solid endorsements too.
Yeah,
and a lot of good endorsements.
The dynamic of this race really go ahead, Nav. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. I think what's going to be really interesting in this race, I know Blake touched on, we've seen a lot of outside spending. I think there's been a lot of outside spending coming in support of David Tongipa, specifically targeting Democratic voters. And that's what I'm really curious to see tonight is if those Democrats come out in numbers for David Tongipa, I think David Tongipa is going to be going to the state assembly.
I can very well see that happening. All right, let's move on now to the 27th Assembly District. You have the incumbent, Esmeralda Soria, and her challenger, Joanna Garcia Rose. Now, maybe a bit of a surprise, Joanna Garcia Rose outpointing her, as you would say, in the primary, but I don't know how telling that is, or if that was just sort of an anomaly. What's your impression of that, all of you?
I think the big thing in the 27th is, the primary was so Republican heavy. Democrats had nothing to show up for. Republicans in that district had tons to show up for. They were still contesting a primary for president. In Fresno County, you had a very hotly contested countywide ballot measure in Measure E that Republicans very much opposed. And so, the question now, based on early vote data, has been, for a while, Republicans had a ballot lead in this race, even now. And I can think back to the midsummer when there was a transition and who was going to be at the top of the ticket. I contended that if Joe Biden remained on the ticket, we would be looking at a Republican holding the seat because there's just not a lot of enthusiasm in this district for the top of the ticket if it's Joe Biden. This is a race where I really do believe Kamala Harris's presence on the ticket could make the difference for a down ballot race, because if she's able to motivate Democrats just enough to show up across Merced, Madera, and Fresno counties, Esmeralda Soria is going to, pull away with hopefully, somewhere around a 5-point lead. But if she doesn't, this is a race that could come down to the wire, and a Republican could win.
Nav, you see it the same way?
I think it'll be close, but I think the Soria campaign is feeling pretty good. They've had a huge resource advantage in this district, and I think the Assembly Democrats have a great candidate here that has a record of delivering for those districts. So while we're seeing, a little bit of a lead in Republican ballots coming in early, I think there's going to be some crossover voters for Soria that appreciate her bringing her efforts on reopening Madera Hospital and other efforts. So I'm feeling confident that Assemblymember Soria is going to be reelected.
From what you're seeing right now, then, and again, it's always going out on a limb to make any predictions, but from what you are seeing right now, both nationally and locally, I guess no local returns have come in as yet, but your impressions from what you've seen leading up to this, anybody want to say what they expect to happen in the presidential election, in our Senate election? I think I know what you're going to say about that one, and some of these local races we spoke about.
I think the Dodgers' luck has run out when it comes to the month of October, November. I think Steve Garvey is not going to be the next senator from California. Okay. I won't make any predictions about president. It's still way too early. But I think we're going to see a decisive Senate election, and I think we'll be talking in we'll be talking around Thanksgiving about the 2 congressional races that are really targeted here in the region. We won't have any idea who's going to win for weeks.
Blake?
Yeah, I agree. I think that no surprises at the U.S. Senate level. Agreed with the presidential. I think it's still way too early for us to make any predictions there. But ballots are still going to be trickling in. I was just near a drop box today. People were still turning in their ballots, and those are going to be counted. Certainly a lot later. In the coming weeks here, because they have to process all of those ballots. So we're not going to know right off the bat unless there's a big decisive margin in some of these congressional races, which, as we just discussed, is just not the case. It's going to be down to the wire. It's going to be close in all of these Valley races that will really determine control of Congress for the rest of the country.
Nav, how about you?
Can't help but agree. I mean, we're not going to know the fate of CA13 and CA22 tonight. I know we talked about some of the easier ones. Is going to be reelected. Adam Schiff is going to become our next U.S. senator. I think Jim Costa is going to be reelected pretty easily, and I'm gonna be bold here and predict that Esmeralda Soria is going to have a very comfortable election night victory tonight.
Wouldn't it be nice if such agreement between all sides could be had as easily as this is right now? That's not.
It helps when there's a lot of question marks out there.
That's what the Maddie Institute does. Brings all the sides together.
Of course. All right, gentlemen. I know we're going to be watching this till late into the night, but thank you for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. And we'll check again.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monty. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Monty Torres with FOX26 News on YouTube. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel, where we have loads of great content for you to choose from. And while you're here, why not click on the subscribe button right here? That way you can stay in touch with all the latest breaking news, everything news related within the Central Valley. And thank you for watching.